to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Planning Committee. This Planning Committee meeting is being broadcast live over the internet and will be available to view online now and in the future. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Those attending in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Committee members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. And please remember to keep your microphones muted when you are not talking. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? Thank you. We'll move on to the agenda. Attendance and apologies, item 1. Rachel, do we have any apologies?
I've received apologies from Councillor Chris too. Thanks. Thank
you, Rachel. Agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Chris, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ashley?
None.
Thank you. Councillor Best?
No interest.
Councillor Evans?
None that I'm aware of.
Councillor Gordon?
Nothing from me.
Councillor Horder?
Personal, non-prejudicial for as a member of Pontypool Community Council for agenda item 4.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Gaynor James?
Yes, a member of Pontypool Community Council for item 4.
Thank you. Councillor John James?
Yeah, item 4, Pontypool Community Council.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones?
None that I'm aware of, Chris.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Jones?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Yourself, Chair?
Nothing to declare, Chris.
Thank you. Councillor Slade?
Nothing to declare.
Thank you. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Right, we'll go on to item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee from the 7th of February 2024. Could members possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, we will take them as approved. Is everybody agreeing? Anyone not agreeing? Right, thank you. We'll take that as being agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 4, planning application 23/P/0582 FUL, and it's for demolition of existing Greenway Social Club and proposed development of 12 affordable dwellings, sustainable drainage, car parking, landscaping and associated works at the Greenway Club, Greenway Drive, Griffithstown, Pontypool. Right. Can I ask Justin Jones, Principal Planner, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I'll share the slides now with you. Hopefully they'll come up on your screen. Okay. Good morning, Chair, Committee. As been explained, this is a full plan application that seeks the demolition of the existing vacant social club and redevelopment for 12 affordable dwellings, car parking, landscaping and associated works. The site Chair, is roughly an L shape and is 0.3 hectares in area. On the screen in front of you, you can see some aerial shots of the site, which I shall highlight with my cursor. You'll note to the east there are residential properties, to the north there are residential properties, and to the south there are residential properties, and the site is enclosed by mature vegetation. Again, if we look at another aerial drawing, it gives you the same context. So you've got Greenway Drive, which is along the east, the residential properties. And again, this is looking north to south on the context of the site. So these pictures, as I said, Chair, the site is vacant and is enclosed. So these pictures that we see are of the building as it existed before its closure, and they're in the design and access statement. What you can see is that it's primarily 2 stories with gable features on the ground floor, primarily rendered with some slate tiles on the southern elevation. This is the existing access, and you'll see the concrete boundary wall which remains, the mature trees which are outside the site which form part of the TPOs. If we look along the street scene, there are TPO trees which I'm highlighting here, which are red cedar trees. This is the existing road looking north to south. So this is the application site here. This is the existing boundary wall. So this is looking at the site going from south to north. So again, there's the current building. These are the TPO trees. And there's the boundary wall. And you can see the residential character of the surrounding properties. If we look at the proposal now, Chair, Committee, you'll see that there are a number of points. So first of all, we've got a 2-metre wide pavement proposed. So the existing garden will be pushed back and a new retaining wall. We have a block of flats, 1 bedroom primarily, there. And then we have 3 houses, 2-storey in nature, configured in that area there. And then the primary access is through a new road that will be adopted, and an appropriate parking provision for each flat. Key points is that the TPO trees remain, as you can see along here. There's an increased hedgerow buffer, and the existing TPO outside the site remains. The other point that committee would need to be aware of is that there's a watercourse, an ordinary watercourse, for which there will be some discharge into that. That will become adopted as part of the SAB process that the application is going through and is likely to be adopted. So if we look at the landscaping, as committee will be aware and saw on the aerial photographs, there are a number of trees along the boundaries which have been removed. They've been removed primarily because the trees are in poor state. Some of them are ash and displaying dieback ash, and we've got appropriate mitigation of trees going in. I think some of the key ones, the red cedars, remain. They will be managed and polled. They've become unwieldy and a bit bushy, so they will be maintained better. But as part of this scheme, we also get an oak tree on the principal elevation, and then we have more urban upright trees that will go along the boundary there. The plans have been amended so that we have parking outside the root protection area of the existing TPO trees. And as I said, we get additional landscape buffer, which will help with connectivity of ecology features. In addition to the trees, we have various shrubs that will be going around the site and within the amenity areas. This will help with pollinators and general ecological features of the site. If we look at the scale and massing and materials of the building proposed, as I said, Chair, there are 2 distinct blocks to this scheme. So we have the flats, which are in this block, and obviously what you'll see is it's taken its cue from the existing building in terms of the bay windows, materials of render and brick, and there are PVs to help with sustainability. don't know how clear that's looking on the plans for you, Chair, but the internal configuration meets Welsh Government DQR standards in terms of space. You'll note that there is a condition about windows being obscured on the north elevation on the first floor. That's these windows here. They're secondary windows to bedrooms, so it's considered acceptable that it doesn't compromise the future occupiers' enjoyment of the properties of the flats. If we look at the houses which are further down in the L shape, which are closer to the existing residential properties, these have been changed so that we have the hipped roof form, which faces the properties to the east. And again, these are 2 bedrooms properties. And again, to tie in with the main block, we have that mixture of render and brick and the solar panels. If we could just go back, Chair, to the outline, I think it's important to note that the houses have sufficient garden space. So the concern that has been raised about trees and the potential issues of shadowing have been removed primarily. In terms of the amenity for the flats and for the houses, there is space around here, and there is a new feature, as you've seen in the report. If we look at access for vehicles, so this on the screen, Chair, is for fire tenders, which would be the largest vehicles that would be attending this site. And as you can see, it's clear that access and egress and manoeuvrability within the site is accommodated. And so, in terms of bin lorries and refuse lorries, they will also be able to go up there and be able to collect the waste. So it's considered that the site and the internal configuration ensures that there's no prejudice to high safety internally or externally in terms of the access and egress coming out of the site. There are, as you can see, parking spaces are allocated for each flat, and that's in compliance with the council's parking standards. In addition, to aid sustainability, this proposal does introduce a footpath pavement, which currently doesn't exist, which will then link in to the wider Greenway Road footpath network, so people will be able to walk or cycle from the site. Again, in terms of highway safety, this drawing demonstrates the visibility display, which is here. So when you access or egress the site, you will be able to have good visibility given the 20 miles per hour speed limit on this residential road. In terms of levels, as you can see, Chair, Committee, this is the existing houses to the east. There's a significant difference in level, which is why the roof has had to be hipped on this. But as you can see, primarily, hopefully on this one, in that the overall height of the main block of flats is consistent with that of the existing former social club that was on the site. So finally, one of the points that committee have to consider, as you'll note in the committee report, within the existing building, there is a bat roost. Whilst there's no objections to the removal of the existing building by Natural Resources Wales or the borough ecologists, as a decision maker, the committee must have in mind the derogation tests as set out in section 55 of the Conservation Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. And these tests are as follows. Test 1 is that there's an imperative overriding reason for the development. And as outlined in the report, what we are seeking is 100% affordable housing in a residential area. It's considered that the scale, form, massing and use is appropriate and will meet the needs of housing within the area. Test 2 is that there are no reasonable options, alternative, and that includes doing nothing. As the report outlines, the structural engineer has looked at the existing building and to see if it could be retained. Given its dilapidated state, it's considered that the building cannot be retained and therefore it would have to be removed. So in terms of the reasonable options, it's considered that the demolition and rebuilding and the mitigation that will come forward in the pre-commencement condition ensures that that option is reasonable. And the final test, test 3, is that we've got to consider, or the committee's got to consider, the long-term impact upon the species of favourable status. It's considered that with the mitigation of an appropriate bat roost through the development, that the long-term species will be maintained of favourable status. The bats are pipistrelles, so it's considered that there is a reasonable prospect that an EPS licence will be granted by NRW subject to the mitigation coming forward, for which the pre-commencement condition seeks. So before the building can be demolished, we will have that mitigation in place. That's the end of the presentation. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you. Thank you,
Justin. I've got 2 hands up I can see. Chris, is there a hand up in the chamber?
Not at the moment, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we'll start. First question from Councillor Stuart Ashley.
Right, I've got three questions, some of which you possibly answered already. One was the building, and you sort of answered it about obviously the building's been taken down because it's a very unfit state. You can see that from the picture. And you've stated that the HIP building, from what I can see, would be the same height as the existing. Is it a Victorian building? It looks like it. The club. I've been past it on the bus quite a few times. So the scale of the building isn't out of proportion with what was there originally. And you're getting 3 stories rather than 2 from what I can see. And I will state that I'm in favour of this because we're desperate for more housing. So that is, it's getting quite a lot in that building that we wouldn't have in the borough. So from point of view of single story, and you've got a lot on this site, to be quite frank, which looks good. The other aspect of it, going from that to trees, you've got red cedar there, which is not a normal tree as far as I understand. There was some down in the open hearth. A couple of cedar trees there. Extremely long-lived tree, American tree. I can understand taking, if you've got ash there, that there's a lot of ash dieback at the moment. It'd be useful to know, is there Leylandii in there or not? Because it looked like some of the pictures are, but red cedar is amazing, and it's got a lot of stuff that goes in, even though it's not a native tree. I'm concerned about that, which then leads on to the back question as well. And pipistrelles, the little tiny things that look like flying mice, they're beautiful things. And anybody that lives there will know it because they'll be out there after dawn, after dusk in there, and it will make the place tolerable. But, so that's a real plus for the residents, to be frank. I've got pipistrelles where I live, and they're just one of those joys at this time of year. So, no, it's good to hear they got all those considerations going. The one question I have about the bats, were they in the building or are they in the trees? Because you've got red cedar there. Do they roost in that or do they roost locally? So a bit technical on that sense, but I'm glad to hear the licenses are on it. The thing about bats is if we don't have bats, and certainly with global climate change, bats make the place tolerable. Without them, it's not tolerable to live in civilized society. That Steve Williams will tell you that as well. So some questions and observations there, but I certainly would be supporting this because we need the housing.
Thank you, Stuart. Justin, could you answer his question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The red cedars are TPO'd, so they have to form they have become to an unmanageable state. But so there will be some pollarding and some pruning of those red cedars, but they will remain because they are are TPO'd, and they will be complemented by that oak, an English oak, which will obviously add to that character of that area. In terms of the bats roost is in the building, which is why we got the pre-commencement condition that the building cannot be demolished until we have that mitigation in place. In terms of the scale, yes, the scale is in line with that of the existing. I agree. I think it is Victorian design building. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just quickly come back, Chair? Will
Yes.
will the new building reflect some of that heritage? It looks like they're trying that a bit. You know, putting some materials back there. That was of the existing Victorian building in terms of that. And then the other thing was, if you're with the bats, are you going to do what we've done elsewhere in the borough and put a small bat building? And they did that in Pennegarn, and I think they're attempting to do that in County Hall. Or have you got other things up your sleeve with regard to that?
I'll answer this. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the mitigation, we require some additional surveys to work out what that full mitigation will be. It could be a bat house, but it's more likely. But it's more likely to be within the building because the numbers involved are small, so it is likely to be either within the building or within a bat house until we've had those additional surveys, which should be accommodating.
We're losing.
Yeah, Justin, we can't hear you at the moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
No, you're very far away.
Is that better?
Not really. You're still very far away.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Very quietly, yes.
Now? Is that better?
No, not really.
Can you try another mic?
Can you hear me now?
No, you're not very clear.
Hello? Testing? Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
I can hear you. Everybody else okay? Yes, yeah. Thank you, Justin. You're back on.
Okay, I'm just going to move, Chair. I'm going to the naughty boy room now.
All right.
Yeah, so just up here. Okay, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So in terms of the scale, it's similar to that of the existing building. In terms of the bat, as I said, we need further surveys to work out what is the most appropriate mitigation coming forward. It'll either be within the building or within the bat box. But what I can tell members is that as it's a pre-commencement condition, we will liaise with the council's ecologist who will advise on what is the best method going forward. In terms of the character of the building, what the scheme does is provide the dormers, the bay windows, and the render, which are hues to the existing building, but with a modern twist, is what I would say, Chair.
Right. Thank you for that, Justin. Councillor Ashley, are you satisfied?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good actually. So that's got a feeling that was homage, as it were. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Stuart. Right, I'll go to the next question. Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I would like to ask, how many parking bays are allocated for the flats? The reason I ask that question is because if they do get visitors and there's not enough spaces within that area, they will be parking on the main road. And as you stated, there are houses on that road. So I would imagine in any ward, the parking is quite overloaded, particularly when people have left work. So what the observation I've seen, how will it impact on the residents' parking and the flow of traffic along that road?
Thank you, Steve. Justin, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I can tell you is that there's one space per flat, and that is compliant with our parking standards. There are some additional visitor parking spaces. I think what is important is that there are no parking restrictions outside the site. But as we've said before, Chair, Committee, we can't design schemes around the car. We have to, in residential urban areas where we have the higher densities, we have to promote active travel and other modes than the car. If you put more cars on this site, then that will eat into the landscaping, or the number would have to be reduced. But then in terms of the actual design, you'd have a very hard-scaped, flat, car-borne development, which goes against Planning Policy Wales and our own LDP, which seeks residential developments that are complementary in terms of hard and soft scape. In terms of the parking provision, the Highways Officer was consulted and raised no objection to the level of parking proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Justin. Steve, are you satisfied?
Yeah, if I can just come on a supplementary. The reason I asked that, as you're aware, all parking is a real difficulty in all wards. If emergency vehicles need to come through, we need to be mindful that there is room for them to enter that road and enter this new site. So that's what concerns me more than anything, because people will double park. And this is why, when I looked at the highways and transportation, there was no objections. But I wanted to know on what basis. That was all. Thank you anyway.
Thank you, Steve. Do you want to add anything, Justin?
In terms of getting to the site, then obviously that's outside the control of the developer. But within the site, as the tracking diagram showed, is that the highway tender can go up and down, and there isn't any delegate parking in that area. I accept the point that Councillor Evans is making, but it would be for the applicant, Mellon, to regulate to make sure that their customers, the householders, don't park inappropriately. I know that's easier said than done, but that is a matter for them to do in terms of parking provision. It is in accordance with what we seek.
Right. Thank you, Justin. Right, I've got Councillor Janet Jones next. Janet, would you like to ask? Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was just an addition to Steve's question about the parking. Will there be disabled parking facilities proviso in the new development, please, Justin?
Oh, that's a good question, Councillor. The bays are wide enough, but there aren't any dedicated disabled ones necessarily.
Is it something we could ask the developers to consider? Because, as I said, mobility issues are becoming more prevalent now. So I would like to think they could put at least 2 maybe disabled parking bays there. I know it might be something out of our remit, but it's something that they should consider.
Justin, can you answer that?
Sorry, Chair. Committee, I was just looking at the plans to see if, we can certainly ask them, and I'm sure they will be accommodating, because it's obviously for their own best interest that whoever goes in there, sitting on the ground floor flats, that there is appropriate one. So we can certainly ask, Chair.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that.
Right. Justin, is it possible for those parking spaces to be numbered in accordance with the flats, or isn't that possible?
Yes, Chair, it can be, and that is something that I understand they generally do as part of their developments in any case, so that there isn't any confusion, shall we say, for future occupiers.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I've got Councillor Alan Slade next. Alan, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of little things, a couple of observations really. It is 3 2-bedroom houses, and the report says it's 1 2-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom. A minor point. But going back to the parking, one thing I'm unclear is we've been told that it conforms to our parking standards, yet although there is 1 space per bedroom throughout the site, they are short of visitor spaces, because the apartments should have 2 spaces for the visitors and the houses should have 1 in addition to the number for the bedrooms. So I believe we're too short of what our policy actually says.
Okay. Justin, can you answer, please?
I was just quickly counting as Councillor Slade was talking. So there's 16 parking spaces for 12 units. I think you've got to look at the parking standards in accordance to what national policy is looking. We don't have minimum standards anymore. We have maximum standards, don't we? So in terms of that, the proposal is policy compliant.
Okay, so are we saying then that the Parking Standards Wales document, which I know is out of date, really, it's 2014, isn't it? I think. Are we saying that's the maximum now, and not the minimum? Because I know we've sort of refused developments where the parking hasn't met those standards in our parking policy. So it's quite a shift.
Again, Chair, Committee, those parking standards are a guidance. What we have to do is look in terms of policy and Future Wales and Planning Policy Wales, which clearly states that parking must be maximums rather than minimum. The question is, I would suggest, Chair, Committee, is the parking provision that has been supplied of 16 spaces for the 12 units appropriate? And the answer to that, in the view of officers, is yes.
I don't like to be pedantic, but the problem I see here is you're putting a level of subjectivity into the discussion. Because if we're saying that this is a maximum, in our parking standards as they stand, if we're saying these are maximums, if you see what I'm getting at, if someone proposed a development of 20 houses and 4 parking spaces, clearly, I'm exaggerating here, but clearly we would refuse it. But there is no minimum, is there? There is no minimum. So the developer could argue, well, it's below your maximum, so that should be fine. And I don't see that we've got any argument to argue against it. Do you see what I'm saying? I think it's just putting a lot of subjectivity into the decision making here, and which will just lead to problems down the road.
I think on that point, Chair, Committee, that's a matter for committee to decide if they're happy that the level of parking provision is acceptable, bearing in mind the policy objective of not creating car-borne development and to promote other modes of transport. As I said, that's what the policy states. The parking standards are a guideline, and it'd be for matter for members to decide if they're comfortable with that level of provision.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, Justin. Okay, Councillor Slade.
I don't think it's particularly satisfactory, to be honest, but I guess, let's move on.
Okay, then. Thank you. Chris, there's a hand up for the chamber. Could you tell me who it is, please?
Apologies, Chair. It's Councillor Gaynor James.
Right. Councillor
James.
James?
Just moving my laptop.
Oh. Right, I think that's Councillor Gaynor James. If you'd like to go ahead.
Can you see me and hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm sat outside the chamber now at the moment with these problems. I'd just like to welcome this application. It is desperately needed, affordable housing. And looking at the plans, I think that the design is absolutely gorgeous. The buildings are lovely, the gardens that go with it. So I particularly like to say move it. If we can move it for approval.
Right.
I've got another question before
yes.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Gaynor has moved it, so we'll go to your question first, and then I'll ask for a seconder. Okay.
I'm quite willing to second that, Gaynor. That's okay. But the question's a simple one. We've got an apartment here. And the notorious thing with apartments is storage, and going back to certain places in my area, is if you've got an apartment and you're trying to encourage people to use alternatives, which certainly the planning officer suggested, is there any potential in there for cycle and mobility scooters thing, because it's something that's raising its head all the time? I just wondered, because we've got social housing provider here, and if you're expecting people to use cycles and mobility scooters, which is potential. Pardon?
Cycle racks.
No, not cycle racks. Cycle storage is different. It was a question that came up in another place. I'm asking that question because if we're looking at that, and I have been talking to cycle officers about this, we should, and the other one of this is the one we were also talking about, which was facilities for people in those apartments. I would like some clarity on it for storage of recycling. If we're building new buildings, it would be useful to know what facilities they have. So those two things. Is there any? I don't notice anything in this planning application about it, but it's worth asking.
Right, thank you. Justin, could you come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, because I'm outside the building, outside the chamber, I can't operate. But on the layout plan, to the north of the site, you've got a bin storage area, and next to that is the cycle provision. And there is also a condition that we want further details on that cycle provision. What we want it to be is safe, secure, and sheltered. So the provision is there, but we just want a bit more detail to make sure it is usable. In terms of the flats, because this is an affordable housing provider and they are seeking a Welsh Government grant, there is what's called DQR standards, which looks at the usability of these units, and it goes to the nth degree. So there's minimum spaces that have to be provided for storage, for television areas, for beds and all that. So this complies with all that. So we're comfortable that the internal configuration is fine and is usable for the future occupiers. In terms of the waste provision, as committee will be aware, there is a need for recycling streams to be increased, and this proposal does provide appropriate bin storage, which is critical that it is used and it is next to that cycle storage, which is to the north of the site.
Thank you, Justin, for coming back with that, because that was the one I was going to remember, because Other places they're supplying compounds, or they're supplying what's known as bike bins, which are huge, great structures. It's secure structures. The other one was the mobility scooters, because it might be conceivable that, so, disability people have got to get a 6 foot long, 3 foot wide mobility scooter, something that's causing problems in some of our sheltered accommodation. Is conceivable that somebody with one of those might want to live in this development, which is very nice.
Right. Okay.
Again, that's an interesting point that you raised, Councillor. I think depending on who goes in there, it will have to be managed by the developer. There isn't a dedicated space for the buggies to go through at this moment, but it is something that maybe we could take forward at a later date through supplementary planning guidance that could help inform future design.
Right, thank you. That's a very good answer. I will second Gaynor's proposal as well, if I may.
Right. Thank you. Right. There's two more hands I can see up. The first one is Councillor Alfie Best. Would you like to come in now, Alfie, with your question?
Yeah, just on the parking thing, firstly, it was the planning policy Wales 2016, which updated minimum parking standards are no longer appropriate, and local authorities should develop an integrated strategy based on the policies of the LDP. Just a question really on the obscured windows in condition 12. Why is there the requirement for these on the flats, but there's the bike storage and the bin store and the access, and also the houses, plots 10 to 12, have no requirement, but they also border on residential gardens and such.
Right, thank you. Justin, could you answer Alfie's question?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. In terms of the windows to the north, because of the separation distance, there's an existing high land by hedge, which is under the ownership of the adjoining neighbour. But obviously, as you elevated above the first and second floor, you're going to start to be able to look over that. So that's why, and it's at a distance below 10.5 metres, which is what you generally got to seek to protect. Privacy distances over, I think from memory, it's roughly about 4, maybe 6 metres, something like that, off that boundary. And obviously it'd be overlooking the neighbour to the north's amenity space. So that's why those windows are obscured glaze. And as I explained during the discussion and the presentation, those windows wouldn't prejudice the future occupiers because they are secondary windows.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you. Right, another question from Councillor Steve Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going back to the bin storage area, and on page 14, the bins will not be picked up on site. They have to be picked up from the adopted highway. Now, how are you going to get the bins from the bin storage area, and where are you going to put them for access? If you put them on the pavement, you are restricting the access. So what mitigating part of that have you got to make sure it's safe to put them where they are to be picked up? You can answer that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. As I've said in the report, and as required by condition, the internal road will be built to adoptable standards. As a result, the bin lorry will go up into that development. You're absolutely right that in terms of the collection of the bin store, internally, they will collect. There is, let me see if I can share my screen share. You just wait to this will do. So there's the bin storage there that the residents will use. This is where the bins will be collected from for the flats, and as we can see in terms of access and egress for the bin lorry, it can easily manoeuvre within the site. So to confirm, this road will be built to adoptable standards, which will allow the bin lorry to go in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones, you've got a question?
Yes, I should have asked it earlier. Sorry, Chair. Justin, the question I was going to ask about the internal road up to adopted standards, obviously it'll become adopted by Torfaen Council. But do the developers have a management plan for this area, please? Are we aware of that?
Sorry, Chair, can you repeat the question, please? Sorry,
Yes,
Councillor.
certainly. The internal roadway you say is going to be up to adopted standards. So when the development is finished, I assume that it'll come back to Torfaen Council for adopted highways. But secondly, do they have a management plan for this development, please?
In management plan in terms of
Maintenance around the curbs, the highways, you know.
Oh, right.
You
Sorry.
have some areas. No problem, Justin.
Yeah. So as part of Section 38 of the Highways Act, which is the adoptable standard, there will be a snagging process and there will be an agreed format of how all the curbs, the pavements should all be designed before we adopt that.
That's brilliant. That's all I want to know. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Right, there are no more hands up. And we've had a motion and a seconder. So, Chris, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they are for, against, or are abstaining?
Certainly can, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Ashley?
For.
Councillor Best? Thank you. Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Gordon?
For.
Councillor Hawler?
For.
Councillor Gaynor James?
For.
Councillor John James?
For.
Councillor Janet Jones?
For.
Councillor Mark Jones?
For.
Councillor Parish?
For.
Councillor Slade?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. This application has been approved. I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and contributions, and well done to Justin answering the questions under the circumstance as he's had today. He's done really well, and you, Chris, for all the help you've been today. So I now close the meeting.